Alright, checking out another plugin from Safari Pedals. This is the Dragon EQ. It is a 3-band EQ with a shift for each one of those EQ bands and a drive. It also has mid-side and it has oversampling if you are into that type of thing. Currently it is $38 on safaripedals.com, down from $56. There is a 14-day free trial with this plugin and all of the plugins on safaripedals.com, and they don't introduce any noise or unwanted stuff into the plugin as you use it. So use it for 14 days, use it in a mix if you want to, and if you don't want to keep it, you don't have to purchase the plugin. There is an affiliate link in the description, and if you use that link to purchase either the Dragon EQ or any of the plugins on safaripedals.com, a small portion of your purchase will come back to this channel. So I've really been looking forward to making this video and trying out this plugin. I've been waiting for Safari Pedals to release an EQ plugin for quite some time. So let's dive into the mix and you can kind of hear where I used it and what it sounded like before I put Dragon EQ and what it sounded like after I put it on all those different tracks. Alright, so here we are in the session, and I used the Dragon EQ on the drum bus, the kick, the snare, the tom bus, the overheads, and the room mic. The only thing that's happening on this mix is that I have the FG Gray compressor on the drum bus, and I have a limiter going on just to increase the signal for the video. But other than that, this is all just Dragon EQ. So I think what we'll do is that we'll just do a before and after of what it sounded like before I put the Dragon EQ on those tracks, and then after the Dragon EQ went on these tracks. So let's just take a listen. So you can hear there is a pretty dramatic difference with what the Dragon EQ is doing on each one of these tracks. We'll just go through one by one, and I'll just describe briefly how I use the Dragon EQ, kind of what I ran into with it, and you know, some of the different use cases I found with mixing these drums. So starting on the kick. So with the kick, I did what I normally do with the kick, and I, you know, took out a ton of the mids, boosted the low a little bit, and then I boosted the high frequency pretty high. So let's just listen to the kick by itself. So moving on, we'll go into the snare here. So obviously I'm using the Dragon EQ to just boost the signal volume in general. I used this high gain to bring out a little bit more snap, and I used the high drive to just get a little bit more sizzle on the top of that snare, cut out some of the mid, and then boosted the low frequencies around 190 hertz to get a little bit more body in the snare. All right, so moving on, and I think this is where I was most surprised with how effective this plugin is, and this was on the tom bus, and you can hear my toms were just atrocious before actually using Dragon EQ. Here's what they sounded like before Dragon EQ. Yes, I know I need to tune my toms, and generally I do tune my toms. So here's what the Dragon EQ sounds like on the tom bus. So obviously I'm boosting a ton in the low gain band, and I'm boosting a ton in the high gain, pretty much taking out all of the mid gain. But this low drive slider is really what is giving the body to the floor tom here. And I will play this back and take off the low drive, and you can hear exactly what it's doing. You can hear it is just adding so much more resonance and body to that floor tom, and I was really surprised. Generally, when I use EQ on my toms, I'm doing all kinds of peaks and valleys and crazy stuff because, you know, I tune them really, really well. So what's nice about Dragon EQ is when you put it on a stereo source, and that would be the tom bus, you have this mid-side control that shows up. And I purposefully went 84 to the mid because I want those low frequencies. I want all that energy up the middle of the mix and not pushed out to the sides, and that's a really handy feature to have. So I often think of EQ as like a utility plugin to shape sounds before they go into like compressors, to complement other tracks, to kind of bring everything together to make sure that things are sitting nicely in the mix. So I was curious to see how Dragon EQ would sort of work in that capacity with, you know, only 3 bands and then the shift for each one of those bands. But I was definitely surprised that I was able to get the sounds that I'm kind of used to getting with more robust EQs, you know, a precision EQ like Infinity EQ. I really liked this because, again, it made me use my ears, and I was sort of limited with choice, so I wasn't like carving out certain frequencies and really making super narrow cuts. I was able to just kind of use this across every one of my drum tracks and kind of unify everything under this one Dragon EQ sound, which I think is actually a really cool way to approach an EQ plugin like this. That said, there were some things that I missed, like I missed having just a low cut or, you know, a low shelf that you could just take away all those kind of sub frequencies that tend to make things really muddy. If there was a low cut in here, I think that that would be really nice. And obviously you can't get really surgical with an EQ like this. So if you have really ringy things or, you know, frequencies that are really popping out that you can't tame with just this 3-band shift style EQ, you can't really grab those things and bring them down. You can certainly attenuate the signal and just, you know, bring the fader down more to just have it sit a little bit better and still retain the unifying sound of the EQ, but you really can't make those precision moves. All right, so next I went into the overheads. So I kind of just dialed these things to taste. So I will say this is kind of where I struggled the most with this plugin, because I was finding myself wanting more bands to play with just because overheads have such a wider spectrum of sound. But I did find by boosting the low end here and kind of filling out a little bit more body, I didn't have to have the kick cranked as high, and you just get kind of more of a natural sound. And like I was saying before, it's nice to just use this one plugin across the whole drum mix, because it kind of unifies the whole thing under a really cohesive sound. So lastly, we have the room mic, and this is where I used the drive bands on the Dragon EQ pretty extensively. There's a ton of low drive happening, a little bit of mid drive, and then a little bit of this high drive, and you can kind of hear what that sounds like. And again, let's just listen to the whole mix. So another really awesome offering from Safari Pedals here, and the artwork on these things, they're so awesome. And I know that some people don't really care about what the UI of their plugins look like, or they really want it to look like a hardware unit or an emulation of something, but these are so unique and so cool. And I really, really want posters. Gnome, I want posters. I know you're coming to NAMM. Bring posters. I might come out to NAMM just to bug you for posters. Anyway, thanks again to Safari Pedals for sending this over for me to check out. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.